Good afternoon to you. I'm Jan Markowitz. You're listening to God at Work, and my guest today is Vicki Hinze. She's an award-winning author of 23 novels and hundreds of articles and nonfiction books, and she was selected as Who's Who in America in 2004 as a writer and an educator, and she's active in Romance Writers of America and serves as a vice president on the International Thriller Writers Board of Directors, and she lives in Florida with her husband, who is a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel. Please give him our sincere thanks and gratitude for his service.
Well, thank you very much.
We don't take that lightly. I know I don't. Vicki, you are here to share a story with us about how God has worked in your life, and you had a diagnosis that you received during a routine exam. Could you tell us about that?
I sure can. Actually, I had an appointment that was for a routine exam, and I developed some sort of virus, I thought. So I went into the doctor, and he said, we need to get an x-ray done on this. So I went over to the hospital, got the x-ray done. It was a couple days later. I went back to the doctor's office for the results. And my regular doctor wasn't there, but his partner was, and I was quite comfortable with that. I had seen him many times over the years. And when I went in, first of all, he said, you have a spot on your thyroid gland and on your lung. He wouldn't look me in the face.
Oh, my, that had to be scary.
And so, I knew he was fearful that it was cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not use that word. He would not. I tried to encourage him to say, well, what do you think it is? And he said, well, we're going to have to do more tests.
Mm-hmm.
But the entire time he wouldn't look at me. And from his body language, I knew that it was very, very bad.
What was your reaction?
My reaction was I thought I was terminal.
Mm.
And so he ordered the other tests, and I went and had those done. It was over the next week or so. And then it was, for some reason, the test results were held up. And again, all of this time I'm thinking I'm terminal, but I had developed early on a philosophy of worrying is an insult to God. Mm-hmm. So you don't worry until you know what you have to worry about, and then you address the problem and focus on solutions. So,
can I just ask you this? How long have you been a Christian?
All my life.
All your life?
I don't ever remember a time when I didn't believe.
But was there a specific time that you understood about having Jesus Christ as your personal Savior?
There was a time when that came to me, but it was early on.
Mm-hmm.
I was about 11 years old. And, actually, I was probably a little older than that, maybe 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had a heart attack. My brother died. He was an invalid. He had been an invalid. He got meningitis when he was 5 months old, and it left him as a vegetable. So he was like an infant for 18 years.
Oh.
And I watched my mother care for him day after day after day, and she was always so happy and just thrilled to pieces. And I asked her one time, I said, Mom, how can you not resent being so sequestered, in this? Because she couldn't leave the house. If she left, he would go into convulsions.
Oh, my.
If the television was too loud, he would go into convulsions and spike a temperature that was so high he had to go to the emergency room. And she looked at me when I asked her that, and she said, do you think God would put a special child like this in just anyone's hands?
Wow.
She said, he chose me to take care of this baby.
How precious.
And so to her, see, it was such a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I thought, that's Jesus working through her. And I wanted that. I wanted to know him like she knew him.
Boy, what a great message for all of us.
Yeah, and so I started asking, and I just knew. It's just this rush where you just know. But getting back to the hospital diagnosis, I had a moment, you might say. I went in to get those results, and I had spent, the previous, I think it was 3 weeks. It may have been longer now. I just don't recall exactly for sure. I'd have to look the dates up. But anyway, I spent a lot of that time really reflecting on my life and on my work. Am I doing what I need to be doing? If this is terminal and I am at the end of my life, what am I going to regret? Have I spent it wisely? Have I accomplished my purpose? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. I spent a lot of time really going over everything, examining everything. And when I got down to the bottom line, Jan, where I found myself was that I had loved well and I had been loved well. And real life doesn't get any better than that. And so I was content. I was at peace with it. So I leave home and I'm going to the doctor and I'm driving along. And I don't know, maybe others feel differently, but I have always felt funny asking God for things. And on the drive over, it occurred to me, well, Christ asked that cup be passed from him if it was God's will. And he was perfect, and I'm just a mere woman. So if it was okay for him to ask, it should be okay for me to ask.
Right. He tells us to ask.
Yeah.
In his
so
word.
I said, God, if you can pass this cup from me, that's what I want you to do, if it is your will. If it's not, I'll see you when I get home. Mm-hmm. And I was okay with that. The next thought that came through my mind was, how do you have a spot on a gland you don't have anymore?
Is that right? You had surgery before and had it taken out?
I had when I was in my 20s, and why that didn't occur to me until that moment is the hand of God. That is God at work right there.
Yeah, he wanted to give you time to reflect on your life and maybe some changes.
Time to really think about it, really think about things. And I had, when I was in my early 20s, my thyroid went wacky, and they surgically removed it. And then when it grew back, and I-131 radiated it and killed it.
Wow.
And 3 months later, it started functioning again, but it was erratic. Yet for the previous, 3 or 4 years, it had been totally stable. There had been no medication adjustments at all. I'd been totally stable, so it didn't dawn on me to think about that. Mm-hmm. But when I walked into the office and saw the doc, I asked him, I said, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, how can I have a spot on a gland I don't have anymore? And he went stock still, and then he started flipping through my file, and he pulled out that report and looked at it and tossed it up on his desk, and he said, Vicki, that's not your report. The name is one letter off.
Isn't that something?
It really was. Well, see, I'd had my affirmation to do something else, and then that was my confirmation that what I was contemplating was the right move. And so the first thing I felt was just this overwhelming sense of relief. Mm-hmm. And then I felt really sad, and I started praying right there in his office that the person that report belonged to was a believer, because I could not imagine facing that without faith. Mm-hmm. When you have faith, you're built on the rock. Mm-hmm. It's solid. You can't get any deeper to where it falters. But if if you don't have that and your whole life is built on air, you're in trouble when it comes to obstacles or challenges, especially life-terminating type challenges. So I prayed for that person that they had faith, that that they could draw on. And then it was like, oh my goodness, Jesus and God, you bother with a simple little person like me. And I was so humbled and just absolutely awed. And I realized in that moment, I saw flashes of things that had happened in my life where I could see the hand of God over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And it felt, the only way I can describe it, Jan, would be like the best hug you've ever gotten in your life, where God just wrapped himself around me and held me close and said, it's okay, honey, I've got you. It was just total acceptance, unconditional love. And I realized then, before I left that office, see, I didn't do Christian fiction before then because I didn't feel holy enough or good enough, that I had enough to offer. And what I realized with that hug was you do what you can. The master steps in and does the rest.
It's so true. So many times we want to go ahead of God and take care of it ourselves and do it on our own instead of just doing our part and then trusting the rest to the Lord. then we won't have to be so frustrated all the time whenever we do that, and know that He's got it all in His hands and He has all the wisdom and He knows exactly how to care for the situation better than we ever could.